Welcome to the ProArt Master Talk. The goal of the Asus ProArt series is to provide the most advanced technologies to power the imaginations of creators everywhere. Hi, I'm Blake Jones, and today we have the honor to have Vincent from HDTVTest here to give us his perspective about the ProArt PA32 UCG. Hi, Vincent.
Hi everyone. I'm Vincent from HDTVTest.
And we also have Simon, who is the product manager for the ProArt series, to give us his introduction to the PA32 UCG. Hi, Simon. How are you?
Hello, everyone. I'm Simon from Asus.
And so what we have here, let's just go over our agenda. We're going to start off with a short product intro from Simon, and then we're going to move over to Vincent, where he's going to share his experiences of the PA32 UCG. And so if you have any questions, you can type these into the chat room, and then Vincent is going to pick up the questions to answer. And now it's important also, we're going to have a lucky draw prize of a ProArt display PA279CV. This is a 27-inch 4K Type C monitor. So stay tuned until the end of the webinar, and there will be full details of how you can apply for the lucky draw. And so let's move over to Simon now.
Okay, thank you, Blake. And hello, I'm Simon from Asus Display BU. And before we move on to the product introduction, I would like to give you a quick recap for ProArt Display. ProArt is a sub-brand of Asus, and ProArt Display has been developing professional monitor for over 10 years. We have a comprehensive series of products for creators in each workflow. And today, we'll bring you a monitor that is designed for not just color grading, but also 3D rendering and even game development. And let's meet the ProArt Display PA32 UCG. This model is the world's first 4K HDR display with 1600 nits and 120Hz high frame rate. It's a 32-inch monitor with MiniLED backlight featuring 1600 nits peak luminance and 1152 zones local dimming. And let's see more technical detail of this product. And first one, the MiniLED technology. PA32 UCG provides 1152 zones local dimming. You can imagine that there are 1152 squares spread out through the panel, and the luminance of each square can be controlled separately. And the benefit is to provide high contrast ratio up to native 1 million by 1. It's 1,000 times more than conventional IPS display. And next one is 1600 nits peak brightness. I'm sure there's no need to explain the benefit, right? Higher brightness means you have more flexibility while doing color grading. And this model also features sustained full screen 1000 nits. It's another key requirement for colorists. It's important to ensure that the brightness is consistent throughout the entire working process. No need to worry about brightness dropping while doing color grading. And how about the color? PA32 UCG provides true 10-bit color depth. We know 8+2-bit that using decelerating technology is not acceptable for you. Besides, this model adopts quantum dot technology to reach wide color gamut. It supports 99.5% Adobe RGB, 98% DCI-P3, and 85% of Rec 2020. And here comes the other important feature of PA32 UCG, the VRR. It supports 48 to 120 Hz. You might know that the console gaming already supports 4K 120 Hz and VRR, so it's important for game studio to develop the game under the same criteria. Moreover, the benefit is not for game studio only. High frame rate also provides smooth 3D rendering experience and reduces the motion blur. And how about HDR? This model supports not only HDR10, but Dolby Vision and HLG as well. So whether you are doing color grading for video, TV broadcasting, or film, PA32 UCG is suitable for all the scenarios. And speaking to HDR10, Asus Smart HDR technology provides creators multiple PQ curves. You can take as a different HDR mode for this format. It's recommended to choose PQ clip while doing color grading. This mode ensures the monitor 100% match EOTF until the max luminance. And PQ Optimize provides smooth HDR performance, while PQ Basic provides a simulation for HDR content that is presented on entry display. And next part, the ProArt preset. As we know in video production, color space is the key factor that must be set up before color grading. So ProArt display provide multiple color space for creators. And all the color space are put in the first level of the OSD. Just press the five-way navigator and you can choose the color space you need. And how about the color accuracy? For PS32 UCG, the delta E is less than 1. Every ProArt monitor will be pre-calibrated before shipping out to ensure the color, gamma, and uniformity is precise and ready for work. Except the factory pre-calibration, Asus has also developed hardware calibration tool for ProArt display. It helps save the parameter into monitor IC directly. This tool is compatible with major colorimeters such as Spider, i1 Display Pro, and K10. With the upgraded 2.0 version, not just SDR, the HDR calibration is also supported. And there's one more new feature of the upcoming 2.2 version. All the preset mode like sRGB, DCI-P3, or even Rec 2020 can be recalibrated directly instead of saving to user mode. In other words, you can always keep precise color for every preset mode. In addition, we also work seamlessly with third-party professional calibration software, the Kelman and the Light Illusion color space. You can calibrate ProArt monitor via this software, and the parameter can be saved into monitor directly as well. Provide user another convenient way to keep the accuracy. And the last part, the I/O port. To support 4K 120Hz with 10-bit, this monitor adopts DP 1.4 and the latest HDMI 2.1. For HDMI 2.1, it supports FRLO mode with bandwidth up to 48 GB per second, which means it allows 4K 120Hz 10 bits under RGB 444 without compression. This model also has two HDMI 2.0, two Thunderbolt 3, and USB hub for any connecting scenario you need. And here's a recap of PS32 UCG, the world's first 4K HDR display with 1600 nits and 120Hz high frame rate, adopting MiniLED backlight and provides a 10-fold screen 1000 nits. HDMI 2.1 to provide 10-bit 4K 120Hz under 4 RGB without compression. And that's all for the product introduction. And let's welcome Brad to join us again. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Simon. And so, Vincent, what exactly prompted you when you was your inspiration when you wanted to start a YouTube channel?
Hi Blake, and hi everyone. I'm Vincent, and that's a great question, Blake. And I think when I first started my HDTVTest website back in 2007, I wasn't really concentrating on YouTube as such. But I think, over the years, with falling advertising revenues and also with intense competition, not only from English-speaking countries, but also there are various other countries, in their own languages who are putting out really technical reviews on display technologies. And I thought that I needed to find a way to differentiate myself, which is why the transition to YouTube actually came about. And I'm extremely happy, how successful it has become, really. And I think that it establishes my authority in the display technology space, and it allows me to demonstrate my expertise, and I get to meet fantastic people like you as well, and to educate viewers as well. And I think that it is a big part of my life now. It takes a lot of time and effort, but I'm thoroughly enjoying it, Blake.
That's wonderful, Vincent. Yeah, it's really a pleasure to have you here today. And how long have you actually been a reviewer on YouTube? Yeah.
So, as I mentioned earlier, I started my HDTVTest website back in 2007, but it is not until, say, 10 years later in 2017 that I really started focusing on YouTube to, do all my reviews on the YouTube channel rather than publishing it on my website. I think, at the beginning, I was trying to juggle two things at once. I was trying to publish a technical review on my website and then, also do the same video review on YouTube, but it was taking up too much time. So eventually I decided just to focus on YouTube, and it has been very, successful for me, I think, and we have managed to grow from 0 subscribers to currently more than 300,000 subscribers, which I think is a great achievement considering that my YouTube channel is quite a niche channel. It only focuses on high-end display technologies, and we don't have any backing. We don't have like the budget and the marketing of big media companies like CBS, like seen at other companies. So I think I'm extremely proud of what we have achieved in such a short space of time.
That's really wonderful. That's fantastic. And have you found any certain challenges that you faced during the course of your work, or?
Yes, I think from the review side of things, it is not so much of a challenge as to trying to learn with each new display technology that comes around. Let's say with OLED and with mini LED displays such as this Asus PA32 UCG, and obviously the testing procedures have to be refined and reworked over time. But I think specifically on YouTube, the biggest challenge for me is trying to cut through the noise to reach my audience and give them accurate information without being drowned out. And I think many people misunderstand YouTube and think that YouTube is a platform where if you build it, they will come. That is not the case at all. You have to compete with other channels. The thing
Precisely.
with the space I'm operating in is that anyone can pick up a camera and start filming some stuff and put a video on YouTube, and people will treat them as expert, and whatever they are saying is true. But there is so much misinformation out there, and I find it extremely frustrating for me to have to cut through the noise and to publish accurate information and to educate people that certain things are the way they are meant to be. And another part of me also have to strike a good balance between presenting some information in an accurate and maybe slightly dry manner, and also on another side, I have to be quite entertaining and to try and grab the viewer's eyeballs and attention by doing a more striking thumbnail or a more sort of clickbaity, for the lack of a better word, headline. And I think striking that good balance is a really difficult thing to do on YouTube, because YouTube is not a platform where if you put out a good video, people will automatically watch it, because the competition is immense, and the time and effort required to actually run a successful YouTube channel is it takes its toll. So I think striking a good balance and cutting through the noise is my biggest challenge and frustration at the moment.
Yeah, because I found this too. Is like, for example, creating a good thumbnail, even something like this, is very important. It really draws the people into it. Or sometimes creating a catch line for the video. Sometimes it's also something that brings you into, says, gee, I want to watch that video. Yeah, and this is something that happens very frequently. Yeah. So
Exactly.
Why exactly do you think that HDR monitors are becoming more and more popular?
I think it is a chicken and egg question, isn't it? I think with more HDR content available these days, naturally people will want to find displays to watch them on, and I think an HDR monitor is a natural transition. I think with more and more HDR content, let's say Netflix, most of their content now are in Dolby Vision. They are high-end budget. I think they are all in Dolby Vision. Disney Plus, they are in Dolby Vision, and also more and more games are being output in HDR. And I think all those AAA titles, if you don't actually render in HDR, I think you will lose a lot of interest, and you will not be able to compete with other major game studios who are actually producing their games in HDR. So I think HDR is a big part of the content production process, and therefore when people and viewers come to want to enjoy this content, they obviously have to get an HDR monitor. But specifically to the Asus PA32 UCG, this is not meant for consumption as such, and it is more meant for content creation. And I think that an HDR monitor is really important for the content creation process, especially in the HDR space. You don't want a monitor that is inaccurate. And my biggest fear as an HDR content creator is that whatever I'm actually grading and mastering on a monitor won't be translated faithfully to whatever the viewer is watching. That's my biggest fear, that I put out an HDR video that looks utterly lousy on most displays that people are actually watching them on. So having a good grading monitor, having a monitor or a display that you have confidence in with regards to the final output is extremely important, and accurate colors, high peak brightness for the maximum flexibility are things that I actually look for in an HDR monitor. But back to your question of why do I think HDR monitors are important, is because there's just more HDR content out there, and I think that HDR in itself is always better than SDR in my opinion, because HDR just gives that extra range, that sort of realism, that sort of depth that SDR can never deliver.
It's very interesting. Yeah. And so, like, when we think about like the mini LED monitors, HDR monitors, what do you think are the pros, for example, like panel, local dimming, peak brightness, and sustained brightness?
Yes, I think with mini LED technologies, there are quite a few advantages. Really, I think people have to understand the basic fundamental key of mini LED technology is that these mini LEDs, or mini LEDs as I call it, are much smaller than conventional LED diodes, and therefore you can actually pack more of them within the same screen size and the same area. So let's say with a conventional LED you may only be able to pack 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 horizontally, but with mini LED you can pack more, and therefore with a denser packing, with a denser number of mini LEDs per surface area, then what you can do is to generate a higher peak brightness, and a higher peak brightness gives the content creator more flexibility, a bigger canvas, so to speak, to paint their masterpiece. And also, I think one thing that people don't realize about mini LED technology is that because you can actually pack more of them together, you can actually create a more uniform backlight as well. So the way I try to explain things, is by, let's say, you have a room, a really big room, let's say as big as this 32-inch PA 32 UCG. Then if you have LEDs here, conventional LEDs, then you will have gaps, and you have to use diffuser plates, you have to use reflector plates to try and illuminate the screen. But if you have mini LEDs which you can pack densely together, then it will allow for a more uniform distribution of the backlight, creating a more uniform screen. And I think screen uniformity is personally an important part of my job, because I want to see something on screen which is not marred by any blemishes or any artifacts that is inherent in the screen itself rather than in the content. So for me, confidence and reassurance that the display is up to par is a big part of my job, because I'm a stickler for attention, for the smallest detail. I'm a stickler for accuracy, and I think mini LED goes a long way towards helping us achieve that in terms of the number of local dimming zones that you can achieve as well. So again, if you have more mini LEDs, you can have better segmentation of the local dimming zones. This Asus PA32 UCG has 1152 independently dimmable zones. So what this means is that if you have a bright object here, you can keep the blacks dark really there as well. So it will generate a higher contrast perception in the eyes of the viewer, giving you that sort of HDR feeling, the sort of dynamism that SDR just cannot give.
That's really interesting, Vincent. Yeah. So also, from your point of view, what do you feel is the importance of sustained brightness?
Yeah, because when I grade, videos, for my YouTube channel, I don't actually grade all my YouTube videos in HDR because it is just too time consuming. I think, my personal process of grading HDR, it takes at least 5 times the time and effort to grade an HDR video compared to just churning it out in SDR. And I don't get any increase in traffic because a video is in HDR. But from my point of view, a sustained brightness is really important, because when I'm grading a piece of HDR footage, I usually pause it on screen. You're a professional colorist, and better than me that when you want to apply a mask, when you want to get that sort of pop and depth, let's say from a model's eyes, from on a certain scene, you don't actually just run through it, you just pause it on a certain scene, and then you select a mask around the eyes, and then you make it pop. And that's the thing that colorists, how people normally grade their content. So you have to pause something on screen. So sustained brightness is important in that sense, because you want to have confidence that whatever you're actually grading, is consistent throughout the grading process. It is not fluctuating. Let's say for the longest time I was using a conventional big screen OLED, to actually do the grading for the HDR grading. And with using an OLED, when trying to grade static images on screen, there are two worries at the back of my mind. One, will it burn the OLED display in? And two, with OLED panels, normally what you do, if you actually leave a static bright element on screen, the panel will heat up. That part of the panel will heat up even more, and therefore that will make the brightness go up over time. Probably not much, but at the back of my mind, I don't want any lack of reassurance. I don't want any uncertainty with regards to whether the brightness actually looks brighter than it should be. So what I want is a consistent yet bright output that I can have confidence in my work when I'm doing my HDR videos. And I think sustained brightness goes a long way towards achieving that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, and so one of the key points on the PA32 UCG is actually the HDMI 2.1 support that enables 120 hertz. How do you feel that the 120 hertz refresh rate is going to help the workflow for content creators?
I think there are two key benefits. One is from the UI side of things. I think once you use a 120 hertz refresh rate display, to do your work, to do your UI, I think 60 hertz will feel very sluggish. And I think it is the same for the smartphone industry as well. Many smartphone manufacturers have started jumping on board the 90 hertz refresh rate train, maybe even approaching 120 hertz, 144 hertz. And this is because when you actually start scrolling, when you actually start trying to play games and stuff, it just provides a smoother and more fluid experience for the end user than pure 60 hertz. Don't get me wrong, 60 hertz has been here for the longest time, and I don't think that it will go away anytime soon. But I think once you start using a GUI or user interface that works smoothly in 120 hertz, then 60 hertz will feel really ancient and really sluggish by comparison. Yeah. And obviously from the other side of things is that with VR and with more games being put out in high frame rate, then I think having a monitor that can output and refresh at 120 hertz is really important for you to see your final workflow. If you want to actually render a game at 120 hertz, I don't think it is wise to actually use a 60 hertz monitor from that side of things. So I think for game developers who are working in the VR and in the high frame rate space, I think having a 120 hertz monitor with HDMI 2.1 certainly can go a long way towards your real-time monitoring and feedback loop process. And I tested the FRL, and indeed, the FRL on this Asus PA32 UCG on its HDMI 1 port, and its HDMI 1 port is the 2.1 port. I measured an FRL of 48 gigabits per second, basically 12 gigs at 4 lanes, which is fantastic. And also, I think, I ran a resolution chart on the display, and it perfectly resolved 4K 120 hertz, single pixel lines without any problem whatsoever. So yeah, I think, from the 120 hertz point of view and HDMI 2.1, it is where the industry is heading. And I think that, if you want to future-proof yourself, if you are a game developer who's developing VRR games, who's developing 120 hertz games, then I fail to see why you wouldn't want a 120 hertz monitor.
Well, exactly. This is true. Yeah. So, as you're a real veteran and experienced technical reviewer. What are your thoughts about the Asus ProArt PA32 UCG?
I like its brightness. I think, the brightness that Asus has quoted is up to 1600 nits peak and 1000 nits full screen. Personally, I've measured up to 1800 nits on this particular review sample that I have here, and it is really bright, and it gives me that sort of emotional impact that SDR just cannot deliver. And I think on this point, I want to really try and clear up some misconception about HDR. In that, I think a lot of people out there think that above 1000 nits is too bright, and they think that they have to wear sunglasses to try and watch an HDR display that is capable of 1000 nits or even like 1600 nits. That is not the case. I mean, being a professional colorist yourself, Blake, you will know very well that when you grade a piece of HDR content, its APL or average picture level shouldn't be different from grading in SDR. The extra brightness headroom that 1600 nits or 1800 nits allows you to do is to actually, you can grade the base APL or the base overall brightness at the same level as SDR, but you can actually let the specular highlights, let the bright objects pop in a way that SDR cannot achieve. And a greater range in terms of the HDR image, in terms of the peak brightness, is always important to inject more depth and realism to our perception of the picture. And I want to use an analogy, and I want to really try to explain why HDR is superior to SDR. So our eyes perceive light, in our world. Almost all objects, are based on light. When you see an object, it's usually reflected of some light somewhere. And I think there are three components to the light that we perceive that makes up the depth of the image. So with regards to the light, it can be intense. So the intensity of the light, how bright the light is, the shape of the light, and also the directionality of the light. These three components actually make up how we perceive light. So an object can be far away or quite near. And an example I want to use to try and extol to you the virtues of having a high peak brightness display is this. Let's say you have a sun peeking out from the back of a piece of white cloud, and if you have a display that is not capable of high peak brightness, then the sun would be, say, 500 nits, and then the clouds maybe would have to be graded at 450 nits, and then they will look flat and compressed because the brightness difference is not that much between those two objects. But let's say on the ProArt UCG, then maybe you can grade the sun at maybe 1800 nits and then the cloud at 1200 nits, and then it gives more separation, more range for the image to be expressed, for the specular highlight detail, for the highlight detail to be expressed in a clearer manner that is not subject to compression, that is not subject to the really flat look that SDR has constrained us to. And I think that is a key element of HDR that people need to understand, that fundamentally the average picture level of HDR shouldn't be that different from SDR, but with HDR it allows for better directionality, better shaping, and better intensity of the light of various specular highlights on screen to give you that sort of three-dimensional feel that SDR can never give, in my opinion. And when I look at displays that are capable of 2000 nits, 4000 nits, I just get that sort of raw emotional impact that that you really have to see to believe. And I think this ProArt UCG goes quite some way to achieving that with its like 1600 nits, 1800 nits peak at 10% window, and turns out, say, 1000 nits full screen. So that is from the brightness side of things. I also like the DCI P3 and also the rectangularity color gamut coverage. This is equipped with a quantum dot enhancement film. So from the Asus website, I think their specification, they actually quoted a figure of 85% Rec 2020. Personally, using my meters, I've measured 86% Rec 2020, which is not too different from the figure quoted by Asus themselves. And with a bigger color space, again, it's all about the canvas. When you're content creating, you don't want anything to limit your canvas. And with the color space, if you have a bigger color space, you can paint more vivid colors, more true to real life, rather than being constrained to a smaller color space. And I think that with the brightness and also with the 86% or 85% rectangular color space gamut, content creators can have confidence in their flexibility and in their sort of unrestricted canvas to paint their masterpiece. And that's and obviously that's not talking about the HDMI 2.1 support and stuff like that as well.
That's really interesting. And so, what kind of color grading software are you using?
So I use DaVinci Resolve, which is, in my opinion, is the the piece of like editing software that is most compatible with a beginner type of HDR grading, so I understand it a bit better. So I'm not a professional colorist like you. I grade my HDR videos, in my own spare time, and I think that I don't get anything extra in terms of traffic or revenue out of doing videos in HDR at all. Let's say if I had a YouTube manager, let's say, if I hired a manager to come and manage my YouTube business, and he walked in and look at the amount of time and effort I put into doing an HDR video, he would just say, what's the point, Vincent? Just forget it. Just do SDR videos, because
exactly.
For each HDR video that you put on YouTube, you can actually do 5 SDR videos. But it is a personal pride kind of thing. It is sort of like a vanity project kind of thing. So I do it for objects that I think that would sparkle more in HDR. And yes, back to your question. So from the HDR side of things, it is just something that is a personal vanity project, from that point of view. But I think in the sense of trying to use the Asus, I've been really quite happy with the results that I've achieved. And I think over the past few weeks, I've been doing a number of high-profile HDR videos for some of the really important TVs that I review, and I've been quite happy with the results. And I think that I achieved a better HDR outcome from them than when I was using previous HDR monitors to grade my work.
Mm-hmm. So you feel that the PA32 UCG is really helping your workflow when you're doing this?
It is. Certainly, I think, because I like a bright picture, I think, I don't want to be restricted in the sense that I don't want my peak brightness to be capped to a lower level. And I think, having a 1600 nits, it really does allow me to achieve the look that I'm actually looking for in my HDR videos. And obviously, I think the monitor needs to be accurate as well, because the last thing I want is for my skin tones, when I'm doing my HDR videos to look wrong. And I think with the color accuracy that I can achieve on this monitor, obviously it ships pre-calibrated from factory, but because I used to work as a professional calibrator before the pandemic, then I know how to calibrate a display myself, and I can calibrate the display anytime I want using Kalman to try and get the colors as accurate as possible, and have confidence in my work that whatever I'm actually showing will be received positively by my viewers.
That's really interesting. That's fascinating. So your advantage, what do you feel are the advantages of the PA32 UCG to be used as a reference or grading monitor compared to the other offerings on the market?
Yeah, I think, given its price point, and I think, the main competition, again, I'm not that familiar with, the sort of monitor models, on the market, because, my primary area of expertise are TVs. But I would think that the primary competition is probably the Apple Pro Display XDR, from Apple. And I think it is going to be more flexible. I think with the Apple, I found great difficulty trying to make it work with the Windows system. And I don't think it is as accurate as this as well, because this is shipped pre-calibrated from factory. You get a report, and obviously there are various options to calibrate this monitor using your own third-party software as well. And I think obviously this comes with a stand as well, whereas the Apple Pro Display XDR doesn't really ship with a stand. And I think HDMI 2.1 and 120 Hz are again two advantages that the Pro Display XDR won't have. So let's say if you are developing a game in VR in 120 Hz, then I think the choice is clear. Would you want a display that can't even do that in the first place for your real-time monitoring process? Or would you want one that can actually help you in your content creation process by supporting those features in the very first place? And I think Dell is coming out with another MiniLED monitor, but again, I profess that I haven't actually seen that. And I think there are a couple of OLED monitors that are going to be hitting the market pretty soon. But I think from the OLED point of view, obviously they have per pixel dimming, which is fantastic, which means that blacks can remain true and stuff. But I think their peak brightness is never going to reach 1000 nits full screen or 1600 nits peak. And also, the worry of burn-in is always going to be there, especially when you want to grade a piece of really bright HDR image. You always worry about whether that will burn the screen or whether the peak brightness that you are seeing is actually gradually going up. So you don't know what is happening. Yep.
And so, you know, you've been using before the PA32 UCXP monitor. And what do you feel is the difference between the UCXP and the PA32 UCG?
I think, you know, the main difference is clearly HDMI 2.1 and 120 Hz refresh rate. And I think that certainly when I kick the monitor into 120 Hz mode for my own workflow, I get a smoother experience in terms of the UI. That's without doubt one of the biggest advantages of the UCG over the UCX. But also, you know, on a smaller level, I find that the blooming control is probably slightly better as well on the UCG compared with the UCX. You know, it is not 100% confirmed until I can do more tests, you know, a proper thorough test. But just using this to grade my projects, you know, I think the blooming control is possibly slightly better than the UCX. But I think the big thing for people is going to be the HDMI 2.1 support, the VRR support that the UCX doesn't really, you know, doesn't really support these features.
That's really interesting. And so, like, in respect to benefits, what do you think that content creators are going to benefit from with the PA32 UCG?
I think, again, I think I've covered most things, but to sum it up, I think the phrase I'm looking for is actually an unrestricted canvas. You know, so when you want to create your content, you know, you want as big a canvas as possible. You don't want to be restricted or be capped, you know, in your abilities to paint, let's say, an object in a higher peak brightness, or to paint a color in a certain hue, in a certain saturation. You don't want to be restricted in your color space and in your peak brightness capabilities of your grading monitor. And I think that with 1600 nits peak, with 1000 nits full screen, which means that, you know, it is not going to dim down when you display a lot of white objects on screen. And I was reading, you know, some blogs the other day, some colorists, you know, when they are grading on OLED monitors, they always had to be mindful of not exceeding the ABL, or automatic brightness limiter circuitry, of certain OLED monitors, because, you know, once you go above a certain threshold, the whole image will dim down. And this doesn't only apply to white, it applies to bright colors, let's say sky as well. So by not having that sort of restriction, by not having that sort of handicap, then, you know, you are free to paint your masterpiece in any way you want. And I think the Rec 2020 color gamut of coverage of 86% or 85% as quoted by Asus, you know, is going to be an important part of it as well. I think those are the key for me. I mean, unrestricted canvas. And I think, you know, if you want to talk about unrestricted from the refresh rate side of things, 120 Hz, you know, is clearly less restrictive than 60 Hz.
That's really wonderful. Well, this has been a really great conversation, Vincent, and thank you so much for sharing your expertise, and it's really been a pleasure speaking with you. And so, thank you very much, thanks. And I just want to remind everybody, don't forget to fill out the questionnaire and answer the quiz via the QR code that we'll be showing, so you can get a chance to win the prize in the lucky draw. We've got another 2 ProArt Master Talk events coming up, so don't forget to set a reminder via the link in the description below, and also check out our product page for the complete schedule. And I want to thank you all for attending, and I hope to see you soon. Thanks a lot.